99%. That's the share of the world's smartphones running on chip designs from a company that has never manufactured a single chip. So how does a business with 0 factories become one of the most critical companies in tech?
And the decision that made it all possible?
They chose to sell the blueprint instead of building the factory. Most investors called it madness. It turned out to be one of the most influential bets in semiconductor history. This is moat and margin. Arm's business model is deceptively elegant. They design processor architectures, the fundamental instruction sets and core layouts that tell a chip how to operate. Then, they license those designs to companies like Apple, Samsung, and Qualcomm, who build their own chips on top of them. Arm earns money 2 ways. An upfront licensing fee, typically millions, just for access to the architecture. Then, a per-chip royalty on every single processor shipped. Every phone sold, every smart device activated, every server deployed. Arm takes a cut.
But here's the thing most people miss.
In the early 90s, Arm was a 12-person spin-off from Acorn Computers, a company that was itself on the verge of collapse. They had no money to build chips. That constraint, not having enough cash to manufacture, led to the licensing model that would eventually make them indispensable. Their first major customer was Apple, the original Newton PDA. It flopped commercially, but it proved something critical. Arm's low-power designs could run on batteries for hours when rivals couldn't, and that advantage was about to become the most valuable feature in computing history.
Move 1.
The licensing bet. Instead of competing with Intel by building their own chips, Arm did something no semiconductor company had tried at scale. They allowed licensees to modify their designs. Any licensee could take the Arm architecture and customize it for their specific needs. Apple did, Samsung did, Qualcomm did, and each one became part of the Arm ecosystem. The trade-off was significant. They earned pennies per chip instead of pounds. But here's why it worked. Every new licensee expanded the ecosystem. More developers wrote software for Arm. More tools supported the architecture, and switching away became harder with every passing year. If you're building a platform business, this is the move. Price for adoption, not margin, because network effects compound faster than unit economics. Move 2. The mobile land grab. When Nokia, Motorola, and then Apple started building smartphones, they all needed processors that could run complex software on tiny batteries. Intel's x86 architecture was powerful, but it ran hot and drained power. Arm's designs were the opposite. Nearly every smartphone that shipped between 2007 and today runs on Arm architecture.
But here's what almost nobody talks about.
In 2016, SoftBank bought Arm for £24 billion and took it private. The tech world was surprised. A Japanese conglomerate known for aggressive bets had just acquired the company that powered nearly every phone on Earth. And suddenly, Arm's future was shaped by new strategic priorities. Move 3. Beyond mobile. For decades, the data center was Intel's stronghold. x86 processors ran nearly every server on Earth. But cloud providers were spending billions on electricity, and Arm's energy-efficient architecture suddenly looked very attractive at scale. Amazon built Graviton, their own Arm-based server chip. In some cases, performance matched Intel, and power consumption dropped significantly. Move 4. The AI pivot. When the generative AI boom hit in 2023, every chip company sought to position themselves. Arm didn't try to compete with Nvidia on training. Instead, they focused on inference, the part where AI models actually run on devices. Your phone's voice assistant, your car's self-driving system, your smart speaker, all running AI inference on ARM chips. But the move that actually helped ARM came after a period of significant challenge. We'll get there. If you're in a market where your customers are bigger than you, this is the lesson. Don't compete on their terms. ARM never tried to out-manufacture Intel or out-compute Nvidia. They made themselves the layer underneath that everyone else built on top of. The most dangerous position in business isn't being small. It's being replaceable. ARM made sure they weren't.
But here's what nearly derailed them.
ARM's biggest customers started designing their own chips. Apple built the M series, Google built Tensor, Amazon built Graviton. The companies paying ARM royalties were quietly building the capability to reduce their reliance on ARM. Then it became more complicated. Qualcomm, one of ARM's largest licensees, acquired a chip startup called Nvidia. ARM claimed Qualcomm was using Nuvia's ARM licenses without authorization. Qualcomm disagreed. The lawsuit raised questions about the future of ARM's licensing model. If Qualcomm prevailed, it could have set a precedent affecting ARM's business. And SoftBank, ARM's owner, was facing significant financial losses. The Vision Fund had lost £27 billion in a single year. SoftBank needed cash. They tried to sell ARM to Nvidia for around £30 billion. Regulators blocked it. For the first time in decades, ARM's future was uncertain.
Here's what changed everything.
In September 2023, ARM went public on Nasdaq. And they didn't just list, they restructured the business model. Instead of flat per-chip royalties, ARM shifted to value-based pricing. The more powerful the chip, the higher the royalty. AI chips, automotive processors, data center chips, all commanding premium rates.
The numbers tell the story.
ARM's revenue per chip had been roughly flat for a decade. After the pricing shift, royalty revenue jumped 37% in a single year. Gross margin, 96%. For every pound ARM earns, 96 pence is profit before operating costs. That's not a typical tech company margin, that's a toll bridge. If you're building a technology product, license the standard instead of selling the product, because standards compound while products get replaced. ARM didn't sell chips, they sold the language chips speak, and languages are almost impossible to abandon once adopted. If you're entering a market dominated by bigger players, don't fight them. Become their infrastructure. ARM's customers are worth trillions collectively, but none of them can replace the architecture underneath without rebuilding everything from scratch. That's not just a moat, that's a geological feature. But the biggest lesson isn't about strategy. It's about timing. If you're sitting on pricing power, don't use it until the switching costs are high enough that customers can't leave. ARM waited decades to raise royalties. By then, the entire computing world was locked in. Patience isn't passive, it's the most aggressive strategy there is. 99% of smartphones. That number from the beginning? It didn't happen because ARM built the best chip. It happened because they built the best business model, one where every customer's success made ARM more essential. Next time, we're breaking down a company that took the opposite approach. They built the factory, owned the supply chain, and bet everything on manufacturing. And it worked even better. Subscribe to Moat and Margin so you don't miss it.